Well, from what I've kind of looked at and understood about the soils is there's really three pools of nutrients in that soil. You've got this total nutrient pool, which I didn't have time to talk about today, which it's a huge amount of organic and inorganic nutrients in that soil profile. And then you've got the extractable pool, which we'd measure with the Bray soil test. And then we've got a plant available tool, which I measure with what's called the soil health or the Haney test, which that's looking at microbial activity in the soil and using weak acids that are highly buffered. And it's looking at what's available today. What does that crop see today in that field, basically? When we look at fertility management saying, okay, we took off more, we should need to apply more. Well, think about last spring. Did we apply more fertilizer for that yield that we took off? Probably not. So where did that extra yield actually come from? Well, it came from rain at the right times, and like I had mentioned, increased carbon dioxide in the atmosphere had a lot to do with increasing the photosynthetic ability of that plant. When we increase the photosynthesis of the plant increases the sugars in the plant, which release more of those sugars into the soil to feed more microorganisms in the soil in exchange for nutrients. So more of the nutrients that are actually available come from what's in the soil naturally and what the microbes can make available more so than the actual fertilizer that we apply. Plants only take up about 10% of those nutrients that we actually apply directly. The other 90% have to go through a microbe's gut, and at most, only about 35 to maybe 45% of those nutrients actually get into the plant that we apply. So where's the rest go?
What should a farmer be doing? Typically, they'll take a soil test, and the ag retailer will say, well, you need 1, 2, and 3. That may not really be what they want.
Well, when we take a look at like the nutrient loss reduction strategy and things like that, and we're trying to reduce the amount of fertilizer out there, but we're also doing it on a 4R system of a maintenance buildup as well, because once you build up to a level, then the likeliness of having a response to a fertilizer application is low. So then we just go on a maintenance system or a removal system on that. Well, when you start looking at that, we're putting a lot of fertilizer out there sometimes, more than what the soils can hold. And so some of those nutrients are either being locked up, tied up in the soil, or losing it through either tile lines or eroding off fields as well. So it's really hard to build up that soil system at times as well. I look at, instead of taking a soil test every 4 years and trying to do a baseline or a trend analysis, I look at managing fertility every year with soil testing to make sure that giving the plants what they need, couple that with tissue testing in season plus in season soil testing to make sure that the plant and the soil are functioning together instead of just putting it all up front and hoping for the best at the end.
Because that plant is really doing a lot more along with the roots and the soil health than just taking up those nutrients that you may apply that comes out of the back of a fertilizer spreader.
Absolutely. So with the soil testing I do and kind of the software system where I look at different attributes of that soil to determine where I'm going to take soil samples at as well, what we find is that it's not the higher fertility areas of fields that have the highest yield. It's areas of the field that have water extractable organic carbon and microbial activity. Those two things, where we have those higher in fields, that's where our highest yield areas are. Sometimes that does not match up with the fertility at all on a standard soil test. So when I look at it, we're basing all these decisions off a test that's 80 years old. And we've got new tests, we've got new technology in our tractors, in our combines, and everything else. Why are we relying on 80-year-old technology to make fertility recommendations? We can't use the same soil test that got us into the situation that we're in on the amount of nitrates and phosphorus that's in our water system to get us out of the situation.
For somebody who is really interested in getting into cover crops or managing them better, and looking at soil health and trying to improve it, what should they do?
I think the best thing is to look at this type of soil test to understand where you're starting at and to understand different carbon and nitrogen ratios of your cover crops, to understand, are you going to inhibit the growth of microbial activity or increase the growth of microbial activity? Carbon drives this whole system, but if you don't have enough microbial activity in the soil system and you throw too much carbon on it, you can snuff a lot of it out. Think of it like building a fire. We start building a fire with just little twigs, right? If we were to throw on a big 3-foot log on top of twigs, what do? We'd snuff it out. That's the same thing with like cereal rye or even corn on corn. That's a huge amount of carbon we throw on there, and there's not enough nitrogen in that system for those microbes to digest it, so it's all being tied up. So we had to learn how to feed the microbes to feed our cash crops.